Greetings, rednecks. Welcome back to Disenthrall. I am Patrick Smith. I had to lead off with some upbeat music because this show in particular is probably going to get a little sideways. So, with that said, I would like to welcome to the show the Sherry Voluntary, Tennessee resident, host of the Sherry Voluntary Show, and postcards from Somalia, right?
Yes.
Welcome to the show.
Because we finally moved there. Thank you. It's always great to be on your show, Patrick. I love it. So I'm really excited to talk about what we got to talk about today.
Well, I hope it's excellent to be on my show today because we're talking about this.
Yeah.
And there's not very many people with whom I would enjoy talking about this particular subject with than you.
Oh, I don't know why. I'm a lover of cops.
You are well spoken on the subject, and so I've got like three different things that we can talk about. We can talk about Amber Guyger, whose trial, of course, just finished. She got was guilty of murder, found guilty of murder, sentenced to a amazing 10 years in prison.
Yeah,
and then maybe just a status update on the Gerald Goins trial in Houston, and then just to round out everything, we got a little special article maybe we can read through at the end.
Okay.
And at any time, at any time, if we need a little emotional break, we got. All right. Okay. We got to dance. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we can tiptoe through the tulips to bring our blood pressure down so we don't have heart attacks and stuff.
It's not meant to make light of the situation. It's just meant to psychologically get us through. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't laugh about it, all you do is stay angry all the time. I know that's something that I have a problem with, is trying not to be angry about all this stuff constantly because it's out there all the time.
I know. I encounter friends and family that are like, you say a lot of bad stuff about cops. They're, a few bad apples, blah, blah, blah. I'm like,
right.
The only reason you think it's a few bad apples is because you are literally not watching you don't follow the news sources that report on it, because every single day of my life, I've got not just one, but usually several stories about the evil stuff that some cops are doing somewhere.
Right. Yeah. And I think the problem is that people mistake it for anecdotal when it's systemic. They aren't looking at the big picture, and people like you and I, who this is something that we see constantly. I guess you could say we get I've been told to have a false view of that because I'm only looking at the bad, but that's what's out there. And it's not just about, that, we hate cops. That's not it. It's from the recruitment process, where they seek applicants within a certain IQ range with certain personality traits, to the training where they're taught the mentality of a warrior rather than a servant. And so they're taught to treat every encounter as a threat rather than, hey, maybe this is somewhere I can help. That would be a servant's mentality. And then after that, they're on the job. They're given legal and fraternal protection and special privileges by the law that they enforce. They're not peacekeepers, they're enforcers. And then, you have laws that legitimize their immorality, like civil asset forfeiture, where they're taught consistently to do something that they know is wrong. Or red flag laws, anyone? That too. So, when I think about that Lord Acton quote that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And then, that's not just talking about politicians. That's talking about anyone. And when you give someone a badge and a gun and tell them they have the right to murder wantonly, what do you think you're going to get? Or rob people on the side of the highway and be judge, jury, and executioner? What do you expect? What do you expect from these people? And then to me, the one of the biggest parts of that is the training, is the red flag laws, the civil asset forfeiture. They're proving to you every time they do that, or every time they back up that practice, that they will enforce laws even if they know they're wrong. when they say blame the politicians, not the police, they're telling you they will come and take your guns if they're told to. They will take your money if they're allowed to do it. So I don't see where anybody gets that there's just a few bad apples, honestly.
Well, folks, that's why I invited Sherry on the show. Good stream. See you later. that pretty much sums it up. No, well said.
Thank you. Namaste. Out.
So I guess let's quickly run through the facts of the trial as you know it kind of was deliberated that they happened. I have watched about 7.5 hours of content live streamed from the trial. I've watched all of the defense and prosecution opening statements. I've watched the testimony, not of all the testimony, but of Amber's testimony, and I also watched all of the closing arguments as well as the sentencing stuff. So I feel like I'm pretty familiar with the evidence, and I'm also well, we'll get into it. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was the strategy both the defense and the prosecution in this case used, because you know, anytime there's anything like a boogaloo, you know, there's a chance that you know
Right.
somebody watching this might be in one of those seats under the thumb of the prosecutor or being defended by the defense,
Right.
and oh well, we can get into it. So. Why don't we just go through the facts real quick? Amber Guyger was coming home from work. She had worked a long day. She was coming home, so I forgot the specific time, 7, 8, something like that.
Like a 10-hour shift.
She parked on the wrong parking floor of her parking garage, like one floor below or above her floor. Walked in, didn't notice she was on the wrong floor, walked all the way to, I guess, where her door would have been had she been on the right floor. She was carrying her body armor and her backpack from her day's work. They have like an RFID style key fob instead of an actual key, but you still put it in a slot on the door and you turn it to open the door. And when she put her fob in the door sort of basically pushed open because it wasn't latched or locked. And she said at the same time as she was pushing the door open, she heard movement in the house. And so I believe she left her fob in the door. Her right hand was free. She pulled out her pistol and entered the apartment where, and I show this guy's face because, and this was one of the things the prosecution got right. I don't know if you watched the closing arguments, but halfway through the closing arguments, they said, like, this entire time for, days and days, we've mainly been talking about Amber and what happened from her perspective. And how she felt. Like Amber literally said in the trial, it just blew my mind when I heard the words. She was blubbering, talking about the moment, that she walked in and encountered him and, said that he started coming for her and she thought it was her apartment. And she said, it is one of the worst things, one of the worst feelings you can imagine, is what she said. And I'm sitting here just like, screaming in my mind, like, oh, what about Botham's perspective? How does his feeling rate against that when you just barge in when he's sitting down for some ice cream?
Right. Or his friends, parents, and family. Like, yeah. What about their perspective? I think, them losing their son in this way is probably a little bit more impactful on them.
Yeah, Rika says, imagine being the real victim.
Right.
Well said. Well said. Yeah. So she pushes the door open, draws her pistol. She claims that she said, "Let me see your hands. Let me see your hands," or that she yelled, "Let me see your hands. Let me see your hands." To which none of the over 100 people living in the apartment that were in the adjacent apartments testified that they heard. They had no one. Like, if the defense had, if there was anyone that claimed they heard her say, "Let me see your hands," the defense would have had them in that seat. There was no one that said that they heard that. And, she was still like partially, in the doorway. So it's not like she was inside of a closed apartment. She's out kind of half in the hall with the door open, yelling, "Let me see your hands." She said that she was propping the door open. And she said that he basically said, "Hey, hey," and started to come towards her. And she said that she was scared he was going to kill her. And so she put 2 in his chest. Well, she attempted to put 2 in his chest. One of them missed. And
Stormtroopers often do.
And the other one entered up here and then went down through the heart, through the lung, and stopped in the lower of his back. So, he was kind of bent forward at the time that I guess he got hit. So it basically went in and down, hit all the important stuff, unfortunately. A couple seconds later, he collapsed on the ground and died within seconds, I believe. She said that... I think she said she started to do like CPR with like one hand while she was trying to get 911 on the other. And then she went out of the apartment once she heard the cops coming. And and the other thing that she did to try and resuscitate him was there's this technique that hurts a lot. You can take your knuckles and like dig them into somebody's chest bone. I don't know if you see that, but that's what she did to try and wake him up, she said. And
yeah, no amount of loss of blood is that going to work on. Like you've lost all that blood. You're not waking up by somebody digging their knuckles into your chest. I mean, he's bleeding out, and she had those gauze.
Yeah, so, that's what I was about to say. Go ahead. Yeah,
No, she had the combat gauze right there. Like she could have actually done something to save this man's life, but she didn't. Like they're clean. She didn't even bother. So I have a really hard time with this whole story. And if you like it a little bit, we can get into why. I think it's sickening. The whole thing is just sickening.
Well, the other thing that I noticed, this particular stream that I have on in the background is of her testimony, and I'm trying to find the exact spot just so you can be watching while I'm talking about it. But there was a good portion, I don't know, 5 minutes or so where she got really blubbery, when they were talking about that moment. And I'm not going to be able to find it on the fly here, but she appeared to cry for a significant portion, or two significant portions of her testimony. And at no time whatsoever did I see any tears, any wetness.
Right.
Anything like that. And, the defense ran laps with boxes of tissue paper, making it obvious that she needs tissues because she's attempting to look like she's crying. I didn't really, we got the bottom lip quiver and, all that typical, I don't know, it felt like acting. This is just my subjective interpretation. No, but I didn't see any tears.
It seemed like acting, and also her apology, the things she said, they were all about her. They were, like she said, I'm sorry that I did this, but it was all in the context of what it's done to her life. Someone called her the prosecution called her apology garbage, and it was garbage because it was all about what she's lost and what's happening to her and how she won't get to see her family and how she's lost her job. It was so self-centered. I just couldn't, I don't know, if I had taken someone else's child, even adult child's life, I don't know that I could compose myself either, but there would probably be real tears. And, I would be more concerned about what it did to them, what it took away from them. She just, I don't know, the whole thing seemed very forced and like you said, like an act. Like I didn't really get that she really cared about what happened to him. I feel like she is sorry, but she's sorry for what she's lost. And I think that her demeanor after she shot the man, Mr. Jean, was pretty clear of that when she's saying, I'm probably going to lose my job for this. Like it's about her, even at the point of murdering a man in his own house.
Sorry, Jim Jesus says, I can't believe this guy broke into this brave cop's apartment and put pictures of himself all over her walls. Hashtag back up blue.
Right. Yeah. There's so much of this too, that, she is first of all, police sure do seem to have a lot of fear in their lives. And I don't know why it is they walk around all the time thinking everybody they come into contact with is going to murder them, but they should probably stop that. And the other thing is that the fact that she's a trained officer, right? She's had extensive training, and they're supposed to be more detail oriented, right? They're supposed to be more see more than other people do. And yet they made a deal of the red doormat on the outside of the apartment that should have been a clue that it wasn't her apartment. And the fact that when she went into the place, she didn't look around. And this is the thing. She actually disobeyed police protocol too, because their protocol is to retreat and seek cover. And her back was to the open where she knew freedom was, right? She's just inside the doorway. And yet she doesn't take a second to notice her surroundings. She just sees black men and shoots. And I mean, that's what I think happened. She said she was afraid for her life because he was coming at her when what are they called? The medical examiner testified that he was either bent over or laying down when she shot him. And I think he probably was bending, you kind of go forward to get up. He was probably, like, oh, wait, hold on. You've got the wrong place, whatever. And then she shot him. So I don't get to walk around thinking every encounter I have with somebody that doesn't like me, even threats that I've gotten, the police don't give two shits about. And I don't get to shoot people and say I'm afraid for my life because they look at me sideways. But why are cops let off on that? Why do they get to walk around and determine that what's in everyone's heart? Like, it's amazing to me that people don't see this more. And I guess I used to be one of those people. So now I kind of look back and want to smack myself around a bit, bludgeon myself about the head.
Another thread that I was paying attention to in the prosecution / defense is that, and both sides tried to use the police thing to their advantage. And so they both pulled this police training thing in different directions. The prosecution said, and pointed out, I think rightly, that, she went so far, like she parked her truck, she backed her truck in so that she could tactically get in and take off quickly if she needed to. She carried all of her equipment, she said, in her left arm so that her right hand remained free so that she could grab the pistol if there was an emergency. That was police training. She then like the police training evaporates when it comes to the policy on entering an apartment or entering a place that you think there's a bad guy in. You're supposed to back off and call for backup and wait for them to arrive before you go in for officer safety. Her training evaporated at that point, but then as soon as she got inside, it kicked back in, and it was her training that had her put 2 in the chest. Not any murderous intent. That was police training. We can't criticize that. So it was like they use the police training when it benefits them, and they ignore it when it doesn't.
Right. Sounds like every other law in the books, really.
Exactly. And so then I wanted to talk about the 2 defenses that I found just incredulous. So the
I know where you're going with this.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And dance it out.
So the first one was, I think it's called a mistake of fact as a defense. And this is the analogy that the prosecutor gave while pointing out that it was absurd was, let's say you're hunting for deer and you're out there and you shoot what you think is a deer, but it turns out there was a human in a deer outfit out on the hunting property. You wouldn't charge that person with murder. And so, they tried to bring that over to this case by saying, well, she thought it was her apartment, so she thought she was shooting an intruder, therefore she shouldn't be charged with murder.
Right.
And then the other defense was they literally, I'm gonna start yelling. They literally tried to use the castle doctrine to defend the shooter, Sherry.
Right. I know. It's interesting, isn't it? I wonder if the person's in a deer costume in their own home, does that matter? And that statement, the fact thing you mentioned, I think that's part of the castle doctrine, where there is this idea that if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you think you're on your property, but you aren't quite, and someone comes up and you accidentally on purpose shoot them because you think you're on your property, but you're not, there can be an allowance for that. But this is clearly someone who wasn't where she was supposed to be, and she didn't take just a couple of seconds to do what she needed to do to figure it out. And I want to point out too that there are 349 residents of this apartment complex. 297 of them were interviewed. Out of those, 49 said they had walked into the wrong apartment. Out of those 49 people, only one person shot and murdered somebody, and that was this off-duty cop. So
the one with the training.
The one with the training, exactly.
They said like over 1,000 hours of training.
Yeah, of training to see everyone. She's a hammer and everyone's a nail. And if something doesn't go their way, they pitch a fit and they pull out their gun and they shoot people. They're taught that force is theirs to wield however they feel, whatever they feel like. And then when they do it, people back their asses up because that's part of the system. That's part of the intimidation and fear that they want you to have of cops, is that they're these dangerous people that we need to kowtow to at every glance and every word. Like when they say jump, you say how high. It's your fault if you get shot. It's all plays into this cycle of abuse that is the state. And
so they legit like looked at the jury straight in the eye and says, the castle doctrine means that if you think it's your house, you get to murder everyone in there when you come home. What?
No.
What?
No.
So like that means if I ever want to kill somebody, I just forget it wasn't my house. What? Right. No.
Only if you're a cop. Only if you're a cop, Patrick. It only applies if you're a cop. You're one of our heroes in blue. Yeah. I find it it's just disgusting. I mean, I don't know what other word you use for that kind of, to say that this man is basically guilty of his own murder because he was in his own house and she by accident. And this is one of the other things that I didn't watch the trial, so I don't know how much they went on it. But I know if I were just going about my day and I'm distracted by my phone, they said she was distracted by talking to her partner on the phone on and off. If that was the case for me, that would be a big major part of it. She's distracted and she made a mistake and it's her fault because she shouldn't have been distracted. That's exactly the same. She doesn't have some extra privilege or right because she's a cop that she shouldn't be distracted. Like, she should handle her business like a fucking grown up and make sure she's in the right place. Like, why did nobody else get shot? Why is out of 49 people, only one shoots? It's the one that's been told that she has the authority and the power and that she should be afraid of everyone she comes into contact with. I mean, they give themselves a complex.
Jim Jesus says, quote, I thought some white folks broke in my house, O.J. Simpson.
That's great. Can we talk about that for a second, about some of the pretrial stuff? Are you still want to talk about the castle doctrine?
We can talk about whatever you want, Sherry.
So that's one of the things that I think where race
are coming from you right now. So go ahead. I'm just like, what? And you're like, go ahead.
Hunty, let me tell you. So I think this is where race does play a factor. I don't think that necessarily she wanted to kill him because he was black, but it doesn't change the fact that another black man is shot by a cop. And one of the things that they did in pretrial, the defense did, was they tried to get the trial moved to another county, a county that, as you know, around Dallas, that's less diverse, whereas you have many more brown and black people in Dallas. So I think that was a big move because, let's face it, black folks have known what's up with the cops for a long, long time. Like, I mean, you look at the 50s when it was basically, they were under martial law out in California. So I think that that's something that people really should take into account, is that this jury was more diverse. And then if it had been a more white jury, they probably would have been more sympathetic to this chick. Because look, let's face it, white people are not confronted with the police as much as black people are. And that's changing. I think that's part of why it's become more of a topic of conversation among more people. And so I think that's part of why that race does play an element, is that was something they wanted to do, was to move it so that they could get a more white jury. which I think is pretty sick. I think it's gross. But I guess that as a defense lawyer, you're trying to defend your client and you're trying to set up the best circumstances for that. So
yeah,
I just thought that should be mentioned.
I don't think the defense did a very good job, but then again, I don't know that they could have done a very good job because this is like an open and shut. Like this is
she's not very sympathetic
as it possibly gets. I'm leaving. I've left this video running. She's been crying on and off in the background. Her face has not even gotten wet at all.
And I think this comes down to too that all that training, like the defense tried to say that her making a mistake and the fact that she's a cop should alleviate, like we were saying that she tried to put 2 in the chest because that was her training, that somehow makes it better. But in my opinion, it makes it worse when you have all this training and you're giving all these special privileges and powers and authority, and yet you still make this kind of simplistic mistake, which she could have, there were several points where she could have backed off and done what she was actually trained to do and not murdered this man. But that makes them more culpable, not less. And police should never be held to the same standard as regular people. They should be held to a higher standard because they have all that training. They have all those privileges. Like I don't understand why that is so hard for some people to understand, except for they just cannot get past their own belief in authority enough to see that there's a problem with police in this country and that they are the standing army against you and I and what's right. Our rights.
You continue to nail it, Sherry.
If I were a cop, I could nail everyone.
True.
In a rapey way too.
So now, like, I don't know how many people watched all these arguments that I watched. Don Bates says, we trained on other levels of force continuum. Where was the training that allowed her to determine he was unarmed? She said that she wasn't able to see his hands, therefore she felt threatened, therefore she shot him.
Maybe she shouldn't shoot if she can't see well enough.
Well, it was her house. The prosecution also pointed out that she had her belt and her pack and all of her equipment in her left arm. She could have taken a moment to grab a stun gun or to grab any other weapon that might have helped de-escalate it. She could have backed up and waited. She could have, maybe trapped him in the house until backup arrived. Anyway,
I guarantee if she'd have stepped out into the hallway, back into the hallway, and assessed for a second, this wouldn't have happened. I do believe she accidentally went in there. That's not what's at stake. Yeah. It's all the stuff after, and I think she lied. I think she lied about Mr. Jean and him coming towards her and everything. Yep. And I think she did that because she expected the thin blue line to work for her like it's worked for so many others in the past and be able to protect her. The only problem is that I don't know if it's the climate of Texas right now where you had the Dennis Tuttle and Rhonda Nicholas
we'll
shooting
get to them.
So I don't know if it's that climate that changed things. But I think you had everything come together in just one of those unusual ways that she wasn't able to get off, that they weren't able to, to protect her completely. And even afterwards, you have the prosecutor saying 10 years does seem light, but I'm satisfied with it. Like they're okay with the fact she got off light because it's a token sentence. It's like we had to charge her. Yes. We had to put her in jail for something, but we're not going to give her what the defense wanted was 28 years to represent the 28 years of Mr. Jean's life. So I think
somebody in my Facebook comment said that it was enough to stave off the race riots, but
exactly. And they found her guilty of murder. Yeah. And she still got 10 years. There's a man they found guilty of killing a police dog who got 45 years. Yes, there were other charges in that involving a robbery, but none of them were murder. He got 45 friggin' years.
Ross Ulbricht, double life for a website.
Exactly.
Double life. She got 10 years.
Yeah, so don't tell me that this is a victory and a win. It's exactly that. It's to stave off people and their concerns, and they can say tokenly, look, we get the bad ones. Look, we get the bad ones.
Yeah.
And they don't. She's going to get 10 years. She's going to be in protective custody. I'd
We're
love to
a
see her in
real
general
justice
pop.
system. We're a real justice system. We promise. See? Jim
Right,
says cops
right.
are supposed to be better at situational awareness. That's why I can't drive and text, but they get to use a laptop while driving. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
That
the
situation.
prosecution spent a lot of time dissecting Texas law as it pertains to when you can use deadly force. Only, I'm very familiar with it because I live here and I have to memorize this stuff. As a concealed carry license holder. And it's the basic stuff.
Doing your duty as a citizen.
I got my license. And so, it's the basic stuff. Like, you can only use it when you feel that you're actually, when deadly force is being directed your way, or at least the threat of deadly force is, et cetera, et cetera. He never really made the simple moral case that was just like the open and shut one. It's like, is there any situation in which you can walk into put the jury on the defense, right? Is there any situation you can imagine where someone can walk into your house and murder you and have that not be a crime?
Exactly.
Can we say castle doctrine magic words? Can we say mistake of rule magic words? Can we say Texas law says magic words? No, I don't give a shit what the law says, what your legal theories say. You don't get to murder people. You don't get to walk into their houses and murder them and then be like, oops, sorry, and go on with your life.
It makes you want to scream because it's so blatant, and this is where it comes out. This is the one good I think we can take out of these trials, though, is that it gets people talking about it. It makes a big deal of it.
Yep.
Look, if he hadn't have been black, this might not have even been the issue that it was. So I'm not saying I'm glad Mr. Jean is dead. I wish he weren't, but that's one of the things that we can point to and say, look, this is happening, people. This is not anecdotal. This is a systemic problem. I mean, look at the guy who, the cop who just recently got 150 days of, I think it was probation. I could be wrong. He got 150 days for repeatedly raping his friend's child. Like, that's the kind of sentences they get. The cop that got off in Hawaii for raping a woman. Like, there is a rape problem within the police and the military that and men's prisons, that if feminists were really concerned about rape culture, they'd definitely be looking into that. So I think that's something that we need to be aware of too. And so it heightens the awareness.
Sherry, men can't be the aggressors. They can't be the victims. They are the aggressors.
Right. You
just wanted to make
raping.
sure. I think you had that backwards. Sorry.
Oh, right. So these special privileges that people allow cops to have, because a lot of it doesn't have to do with the cops and what they do. It's a cycle of the cops having this authority and then people buttressing that with their own rhetoric, with their own, well, I guess he should have done what he was told. In the case of Philando Castile, where he's doing what the cops tell him and he's murdered anyways in front of his child. Like, those kind of situations, I hear people make excuses for them. The cop that just got off for rape in Hawaii, my producer posted that on a local Facebook page here in Knoxville.
Well, she shouldn't have had a vagina.
Right, exactly. His job is hard, someone said. They actually said that job is stressful and causes people to do things they shouldn't sometimes. If that's the case, then let's get rid of the fucking police, because they're more dangerous than any benefit that you could ever get from them. If I'm, I get
somebody
raped.
Actually said that. Wow.
I know they do, though. That's the thing. They do. They say it, and I don't even think they think about it. They just think that everybody who says anything wrong about the cops is a libtard. Like, I get that so often when I talk about cops. You're just a libtard and you just hate cops. And if you don't like it, you can leave. And I'm like, I can't, I can't just leave. I don't have to do that either anyways, but
why should I leave? You're the one who sucks.
Right. And just the fact that we're at the point where for many of these people, it doesn't matter what cops do. It's either there's a few bad apples, or that they just, they will excuse it no matter what. And so we have to get to the point where we're talking to these people and getting them to out themselves as the shameful and vile human beings that they are. Because if you think that somebody deserves to be raped because cops have a hard job, well, maybe we shouldn't have cops walking around policing people for things that aren't crimes. That's a really good place to start, I think.
I think some common sense gun control would be disarming cops at this point.
Exactly. I know. I when I was a neocon, I used to think that was such a crazy idea. Why in the world would you disarm cops? Now I'm all for it. I think that's a great idea.
Well, here's another reason. So I did 4 really long live streams on the Houston police murders, where just briefly, where there's a bad cop, a lone bad apple. Only one.
He's everywhere.
Has very likely, over the course of an almost 30-year career, written a whole slew, like upwards of 1,000 false or bad faith search warrants, and gotten authorization from judge to do many, like over 100 no-knock raids based on what was very likely lies. And it ended recently, I guess 2 years. I think it was a long time ago now.
It doesn't seem like it was that long ago.
I don't know. It was a while ago. Yeah. And so it ended up having this raid against this house where this couple was, you can look up all this stuff, on the videos where I talk about it, but they just basically bust in and murdered them over drugs that ended up not being there. It's a whole slew of lies. I could literally talk. I have talked for hours about it. Don't want to do it again. I just wanted to bring it up to point out that while they charged him with murder a long time ago, there still hasn't even been a trial. So even this Dallas cop has already gone through the entire system, and the most that Houston's been able to do in the same amount of time is finally charge the guy.
Finally. It wasn't clear cut enough in the beginning, in the first place.
And the prosecution pointed out with Amber Guyger, and it's certainly happening in this case. First of all, in this case, only one cop is getting charged, even though they all got together and raided the house and murdered those people. They're just blaming it all on this one bad cop, which I think is dubious at best. You're responsible for your actions. And if you were lied to, sure, you were lied to. If a friend of mine lies to me and asks me for help defending himself, but he lies to me and then I go and kill somebody in the process of defending him, no, that doesn't make sense, because if I'm defending him, then they're attacking, and I don't. That is the truth. So I don't see a justification. Anyway, I'm digressing. But during this whole process, the prosecution for Amber Guyger pointed out that she the entire time was treated very differently than most murder suspects. Like if the cops arrive at a murder scene, you get arrested, you get immediately taken down to the police station, yes. You get immediately interrogated by the detectives as to what happened. That did not happen with her. The cop showed up. She got to mill around and walk around. She hung out she went back to her to a police car and was texting around on her phone, asking all of her police buddies to come help her out, and she was being consoled by the law enforcers. There was this one point in the trial where the prosecution showed this video, this inside the cop car video. She was sitting in the front seat, but it was like a side shot, and it showed her and then out the side, the driver's side window. And, she sees, I guess, the victim's body being carried out, and she just sitting there texting in her car.
Wow. She seems real sorry.
Yeah, she's free. She's a free person, just hanging out in her car, just having a good text, talking to her other cop boyfriend. Right.
Yeah, and I can tell you for a fact that this happened to a friend of mine. He was in his office. He does tile work, and he was up really early getting ready for the day. He hears something at his door, and he'd been having problem with this neighbor. She was a meth head and was had issues with her, but he heard someone at the back door, and he yelled through the door, "Stop trying to come in my house. I have a gun and I will shoot you." He gave that same warning 3 times. They didn't stop. And so he shot through the door and killed the woman. And there were 2 or 3 other men that were with her that ran off. And when the police got there, of course, they put him in cuffs. They take him down to the station. They interrogated him for hours when it was clear what had happened. I don't even think they didn't believe him, but they still, in an investigation, you have to know what happened. And so he wasn't able to stand around and, yuck it up with the guys and, talk about all that stuff. He was they put pressure on you because they want to know the truth. They want to trip you up. Like that's part of what cops do, is that they try to actively trip you up. He was finally let go. He wasn't held all day long. And then, it's like a pat on the back. Okay, you're free to go. But it's a direct case or a similar thing happening where he was in his home and shot someone, and he doesn't get to just like stay there at the scene. Like, I'm sure he'd rather have been, going to work that day, although he really felt bad about it. Like he'd had problems with this woman, but he didn't want to kill her. Like he, there's some issues that come after murdering someone. We're not meant to do that. Like people don't want to murder each other in general. So, even though he had every right to do it, it's still not been the easiest thing in the world for him to deal with. So, I find it interesting that, after you, murder someone and figure out what you've done, I don't know, I'd be devastated. I'd be too devastated probably to be texting somebody on my phone and just sitting there like nothing's going on.
Yeah, and so there's actually a couple updates in this story that I haven't covered, but it's not really big enough to cover. So at first they were reviewing all 2,000 cases by this Goins guy that had been lying on these warrants. Apparently their investigation has grown to include a probe of 14,000 cases handled by the Houston Police Department.
Wow.
At least somebody's at least pretending they're doing something about this. So maybe that's the reason why it's taking a little bit longer, just to speak on their behalf slightly.
Right.
But the guy is still a free man. He's retired and he's free, and he's just awaiting for them to get around to summoning a grand jury, which they, to my knowledge, I don't think that's been completed yet.
I remember in that whole situation when it was happening, that the what's his name, Joe Gamaldi, he's the police officers union president, where he said it was because of dirt bags who have anti-police rhetoric, and that this is a quote from him: "If you're the ones that are out there spreading the rhetoric that police officers are the enemy, just know we've all got your number now. We're going to be keeping track of y'all. And we're going to make sure that we hold you accountable every time you stir the pot on our police officers. We've had enough, folks. We're out there doing our jobs every day, putting our lives on the line for our families." That doesn't sound like a servant of the people, if you ask me. And how dare we, the plebes, question them, the powerful? Like, so and then that Sheriff Acevedo said, when someone starts shooting at you, you don't wait. You get to shoot back. I don't get to shoot back. When I took my concealed carry class, one of the things that they told us, like they gave us an instance. They said, when is it okay to shoot someone? And they gave us a list of different scenarios. And one of those was an 8-year-old child. Do I get to shoot an 8-year-old child? Well, the answer is yes and no. I have to assess the situation. Does the 8-year-old look like they know how to handle the gun? Are they holding it properly? Are they aiming it at me? Do they look like they're scared? Do they look like they actually could do me harm? Those are things that you have to assess as a regular citizen. As a cop, I just get to blow their fucking brains out because I fear for my life. I mean, it's ridiculous that they get to walk around feeling more important than everyone else in the whole fucking world, that they get to just decide who is dangerous based on their instant feeling of, oh, I'm scared and I'm attacked because I'm a cop. I mean, get real. There's a real problem in this country, and the cops are part of that systemic problem, and it's not going to go away. It's going to keep getting worse, especially with rhetoric like this.
That's another thing, and I want to play. I wrote a 3-minute response to Joe back when that happened, and I think it might hit a little bit harder now that we know he was completely wrong. So if you don't mind, I'd like to play that in a second, just to reminisce. But it reminded me of another thing I wish the prosecution in the Amber Guyger trial had made. I wish when he had her on the stand, he had asked her, and I don't even know if lawyers are allowed to do this stuff. Maybe it's disallowed. He could have at least made the statement in closing or whatever. He should have pointed out or asked her, hey, did Botham have the right to murder you when you barged into his house and pointed a gun at him? Even without the gun, did he have the right? Mm-hmm. Yes or no? And I think, isn't that the end of the case? When she's like, yeah, okay, case closed. Bye.
Right.
That's it. We're done here. It's so simple.
We don't shoot police officers.
This is one of those. Yeah, we don't talk about that. We don't talk about the boogs, the boombas. Yeah, he didn't want to bring it up. All right, let me play this real quick, see if it's worth it. Joe, first of all, I just want to thank the community, the individuals, especially the neighbors, that even in the light of the terrible things the police were saying about Mr. Tuttle and Mrs. Regina, weren't afraid to tell the truth to the world about their friends that were murdered. The atrocities being carried out on peaceful people by the Blue Line Gang in the name of the politicians' victimless non-crimes are not going to stop in Houston nor anywhere else. And I want to thank all the activists, especially News Now Houston, for investigating the scene on their own. These activists all played a crucial role in getting some actual truth out of a situation that would have so often just been buried and forgotten as quickly as possible. The world-class activists in Texas are a force to be reckoned with. The only force we've talked about today that is actually doing a net good in the world. Oh! But I want to speak on behalf of the 28 million peaceful men and women in the state of Texas and the other 300 million peaceful people that have to live every single day under the thieving, extorting subjugation of your so-called protection. We are sick and tired of having targets on our backs. We are sick and tired of having dirtbags trying to take our lives when all we're trying to do is get through each day. Put bread on our tables and protect our families. Enough is enough. And if you're the ones that are out there spreading the rhetoric that police officers are our friends, our heroes, and our protectors, well, just know that you need to wake up and see the reality of the current situation. There is no law that the politicians can write so immoral, so egregious, that these NPC robots won't use deadly force on you to uphold. I won't threaten them like they did us, but know that we are watching. We are keeping track of all y'all, and we are going to make sure that we hold you accountable every time you bring evil into our homes, every time you use your hands and your minds and your guns to stir the pot on us peaceful people. We have had enough, folks. We're out there doing our jobs every day, trying to make ends meet for our families. Enough is enough. Now, please, actually protect us and get all these murderers off our streets. I forgot how spicy I was back then. Man, I was pissed about that.
Yeah.
Woo.
I know it's worth being pissed about. And that's the thing. Like, I think, you know, I told a friend of mine just yesterday, I know I'm cynical about the cops. You know, I know that, but I've been trained to be by cops. I've been trained to mistrust the cops by cops. Like, that's a lot of the reason that I don't like cops so much is because of how they act and then how people act when it comes to them. Look, we had here in Tennessee, in White County, not far from me, a sheriff who ordered his men to murder a man because he was giving them a low-speed chase. And they did, and people weren't outraged. That's part of the problem, is that people go, it's not the anti-cop rhetoric, right? It's the pro-cop rhetoric that's the problem, because that keeps people from actually feeling the human rage that they should feel when someone who doesn't have to murder someone does and is protected by authority. So, you know, this guy who, he said, I don't want my goddamn police cars damaged. Shoot the asshole. Like, that's what he said about this man who's in a low-speed chase because he was afraid of cops. His wife even said he was afraid of cops. So, yeah, we don't get to be afraid. Right. We don't get to be afraid, but they do. We don't get to use deadly force when we're afraid, but they do. And so I just think that this pro-cop rhetoric, like, I don't care what a cop asks you to do, you do it. You know, you'll have your day in court, and we know how that works. Like, something I couldn't believe you showed me before was where the judge in the Amber Guyger case hugged her afterwards. They're all cops, guys. They're all cops. When you go into a court, they're all cops, and none of them are there for you. I don't care if it's your public defender or your lawyer. They have to pass the bar exam, and they have to run in those circles, and they ain't going to do necessarily what is bad for them, but good for you. So I think that's part of the problem, is holding people who alleviate the cops from their responsibility accountable. When you are shameful and you say something like, well, I guess he shouldn't have run away then, right? He deserved to be shot because I guess he shouldn't have run away. You're a vile person, and that is where public shame comes in. I'm sorry, there's no other, like people should know that that's a shameful opinion to hold. It's worthy of shame because it's inhuman. It's just not even something that a regular, normal thinking human would do or feel when they know that someone has done something wrong. We didn't have this. I think about, there's something called the Battle of Athens here in Athens, Tennessee, about 45 minutes away from me, where people took up arms and went down to the city courthouse to set things right. And the National Guard was called in, and they said, we're not doing anything. These people are exercising their rights. Today, it would be a bloodbath. Like there's just no accounting for it except for indoctrination. And so it's up to us, those people who are aware of this, to reach out as much as we can to get these people to wake up, to show them all this evidence, and then to shame them when they're shameful.
And that brings us perfectly to the last thing I wanted to talk about, which was this article. And I'm going to attempt to get through it. Please interrupt if you have any thoughts. But this is the perfect example of everything wrong with the way people think about police and everything wrong with the way police think about themselves. And then I want to apply what this article says to the Goins case and to the Amber Guyger murder. Because if we can't square this circle, then we know we're onto some nonsense. Well, let me read you some nonsense. The headline of this article in the Washington Post is, "I am a cop. If you don't want to get hurt, don't challenge me." It's not the police, but the people they stop who can prevent a detention from turning into a tragedy. A teenager is fatally shot by a police officer. The police are accused of being bloodthirsty, trigger-happy murderers. Riots erupt. This, we are led to believe, is the way of things in America. It is also a terrible calumny. Cops are not murderers. No officer goes out in the field wishing to shoot anyone, armed or unarmed, and while they're unlikely to defend it quite as loudly during a time of national angst like this one, people who work in law enforcement know they are legally vested with the authority to detain suspects, an authority that must sometimes be enforced regardless of what happened with Mike Brown. In the overwhelming majority of cases, it is not the cops, but the people they stop who can prevent detentions from turning into tragedies. Working the street, I can't even count how many times I withstood curses, screaming tantrums, aggressive and menacing encroachments on my safety zone, and outright challenges to my authority. In the vast majority of such... What'd you say?
My safety zone. Do I get a safety zone? Because cops sure do can come into my safety zone. My safety zone.
My safety zone. My no-no square. In outright challenges to my authority. In the vast majority of such encounters, I was able to peacefully resolve the situation without using force. Cops deploy their training and their intuition creatively, and I wielded every trick in my arsenal, including verbal judo, humor, warnings, and ostentatious displays of the lethal and non-lethal hardware resting in my duty belt. One time, for instance, my partner and I faced a belligerent man who had doused his car with gallons of gas and was about to create a firebomb at a busy mall filled with holiday shoppers. I bet this is like the only time he might have actually kept somebody safe.
Encountered a problem before it happened?
Before it happened. The potential for serious harm to the bystanders would have justified deadly force. Instead, I distracted him with a hook about his family and loved ones, and he disengaged without hurting anyone. Every day, cops show similar restraint and resolve incidents that could easily end up in serious injuries or worse. I think most days they hang around either in the precinct or they drive around and they F with people's lives. Anyway.
I see them sitting talking together all the time in some parking lot. Like, that's where I see them most of the time, is sitting around chit-chatting, like, on taxpayers' money. There we go again, on the stolen money that supports them.
Yeah, Jim says, the safety zone sounds like code you teach kids to avoid sexual assault. Yeah, that's right. That's what the no-no square actually is. They teach kids in public schools now the no-no square, which is, the areas on your body that you should tell somebody if you get touched there. Let's
be honest, though. Like, it's only a no-no square if you're talking to anyone but a cop, because if they're a cop, it's a yes square, because they have authority. And, the first sentence of this, I don't remember exactly what it was, but why is it that most of the time when cops speak, it sounds like domestic abusers? Like, my dad was very violent, and he would say things like that, like, you shouldn't have done this. I wouldn't have hurt you if you didn't do this. Yep. So why is that they
headline
sound
of
like
this article
abusers? Yeah, exactly. And then also, this is just a big excuse for contempt of cop. When they say outright challenges to my authority, what they're saying is, you pissed me off because you asked me questions, or you didn't jump when I said jump. Like, that's exactly what they're saying. It's just contempt of cop. The fact that I wanted to protect you so hard that you ended up dead because you wouldn't let me do it.
See, what he's trying to say, though, is just that the cops' no-no square is actually a no-no square mile. It's just all around him, and you should not affect the no-no square mile.
Oh, brother.
Sometimes, though, no amount of persuasion or warnings work on a belligerent person. That's when cops have to use force, and the results can be tragic. We are still learning what transpired between Officer Darren Wilson and Brown, but in most cases it's less ambiguous, and officers are rarely at fault. When they use force, they are defending their or the public's safety.
That reminds me of that where he said sometimes there's no amount of, basically no amount of talking or non-aggression is going to solve the problem. Often cops won't listen to people when they're trying to tell them something. They go ahead and do what they're going to do. And they don't like the man recently who was murdered. He called 911. He called for help and said, I have a mental illness. I'm having a problem and I need some help here. And they sent the cops, and then 24 minutes later, the man is dead. So why is that? Why is that someone who they're saying, I have a mental problem, and he didn't have a gun, nothing. They were on him. He's saying, I can't breathe. You're going to kill me. He's begging for his life. Just like Eric Garner did. I can't breathe. You are killing me. And yet that's what they did. And poor, God, the one that makes me cry every time was the homeless man. I can't think of his name right now, that begged for his life and called for his father repeatedly as the cops beat him to death. That is just unconscionable. We have trained a bunch of psychopaths. We have taken regular people and made them into psychopaths, and we call them cops. And that is not okay. It's not okay for them to be able to do this and to be blatantly abusive to people because they have the authority to do so. Kelly Thomas, yes. That if you can sit through that and not cry, or I'm like, I can't. It's disturbing to listen to it. And he's saying, I'm sorry. He's calling for his father. Like, there is nothing more cruel, I don't think, that I have ever heard in my life than that tape. And that wasn't enough for some people. That wasn't enough to realize
one of the cops said, see these fists, they're going to fuck you up.
Yes.
And then, of course,
it was a game.
And of course, the other guy, there's so many, like, we can literally, like, this is what I tell people. Like, if I covered all the instances of police brutality, police abuse, police evil, this entire fucking channel would be a daily video of me telling you who's been murdered, who's been beaten up, who's been robbed. It would just be 24/7. Patrick Smith, welcome to Disenthrall. Here's how the cops hurt people today. And no one would watch it. Well, why does no one care? If you don't realize this is ubiquitous, this is a problem that is everywhere, it is constant, it's because you are just simply not looking at the direct streams of information that are out there where you can clearly see this every single day of your life. New examples of this. I was just going to point out the cop that shot the guy in the hallway that he was ordering to play fucking Twister on the hallway.
On the side of his game. Yeah.
And what was on his gun? What was on his gun?
You're fucked.
You're fucked.
Or something
was like
that.
engraved on his gun. But
that's a mentality. Yeah. That points to mentality.
The song's not working for me anymore. I'm going to need something stronger.
People want to be willfully ignorant. That's the problem, is that if you grant that cops shouldn't have special powers over people, then their whole system starts to fall apart. And so, it's up to us to figure out how to communicate with them and get them to see it. But I think the cops are doing the best bang up job they do our job for us. Like, I'm just like calling people in, look, come, let's have a come to Jesus, because they see this stuff. There comes a point when you just can't ignore it anymore if you're an actual thinking human being. And so, I don't know what it's going to take to wake more people up, but we definitely are at a point where the cops should be happy that people haven't stormed every precinct in the country at this point, because they absolutely would have the right to. And I used to say the same thing, that on my radio show, that people used to, a certain person used to get on to us all the time for talking about cops. And I said, I could do a show all day, every day, do my show on that. I could still do it. I thought about it, doing it, a podcast just on cop stuff and calling it The Report, because you're just like the cop report, because there's just so much out there that proves it's not anecdotal. This is not just a few bad apples, guys. This is training. When you can write "you're fucked" on the side of your gun, or you can have a thin blue line Punisher sticker on the cop car, that there's a vigilante. The Punisher killed cops, for one, but he's a vigilante. Like, that's the mentality that they have. It's not about what the person does in that interaction. It's the mentality that these guys are walking into those situations with. That is a problem. They have blue privilege. You want to talk about privilege in this country? That's a big place that people could start to talk about privilege. Because I certainly don't have the privilege to walk into every interaction as if I can just use whatever force I feel necessary to get the results that I want. And my kids disobey my authority all the time. And somebody tell them.
Yeah, and people have just been in the comments listing like one example after another, after another, after another. Let's continue on until we can't anymore.
Yeah.
Even though it might sound harsh and impolitic, here is the bottom line. If you don't want to get shot, tasered, pepper sprayed, struck with a baton, or thrown to the ground, just do what I tell you, pleb. Don't argue with me. Don't call me names. Don't tell me that I can't stop you. Don't say I'm a racist pig. Don't threaten that you'll sue me and take away my badge. Don't scream at me that you pay my salary, and don't even think of aggressively walking towards me. Most field stops are...
walking.
How do you even do that?
I'm aggressively walking. Power walking to those old dudes at the mall? Are they in violation all the time? Jeez.
Frontal says he got put in a hot box for hours by the cops as a means of subtle torture for pointing live streaming cameras at them.
Yes, they do a lot of stuff like that. I mean, they know they're doing it, and they all yuck it up, and they think it's great. I have a friend who talks about how these people have glass jaws, all the time, and it's sick. It's really sickening, and again, it sounds like, baby, if you just wouldn't text those people, your friend, then I wouldn't hurt you. I wouldn't have to take your phone. If you wouldn't talk to your family behind my back, then I wouldn't have to keep you from them. It's abusive language. Like they're actually displaying the mindset of abusers through what they're saying. It's not like they're saying, if you pointed a gun at my face, expect for me to, shoot you. That's not what they're saying. They're saying, if you question me, if you disrespect my authority, then you get what's coming to you. And that may go to the point of death. And that's just not okay. Not for freedom. If you claim to love freedom.
I mean, that's why I wanted to highlight this article as part of these stories. This is exactly what we're talking about. This attitude enabled Amber Guyger to go in there with the big dick gun syndrome to kill that guy in his own home and then not shed a tear.
Right. And honestly,
this paragraph I just read, don't argue with me, don't call me names, don't tell me that I can't stop you, don't call me a racist pig, blah blah, don't threaten to sue me. This is all First Amendment stuff that you swore to protect.
Yep.
Don't aggressively walk towards me. How difficult is it to cooperate? He says most field stops are complete in minutes. How difficult is it to cooperate for that long? Right. Don't argue
Obedience
with me.
Is a virtue. It reminds me of that meme with the Lego, and it says, doing what the cops say, and it's like a 3-piece Lego, and there's only a 4-peg thing, and it won't fit. Like, you can see that it's not going to work on that. Like, that's exactly what they do. They give you orders that you can't comply with, and even why should you? Like, half the time it's things they shouldn't even be stopping you about. So I think the time is it's slowly coming. It seems like the tide is turning. I mean, if people like me, who used to be I was a vile neocon, y'all, flag waving, boot licking neocon, and if I can become aware enough to see that there's problems, then I think there's hope for other people. So I'll just use myself.
A frontal just made a really astute comment. He says that most cops are ex-combat soldiers with or without PTSD. The war on terror is lost and has come home to roost. I mean, that is well said, man.
Very well said. Yep.
That they give preferential hiring to veterans when it would seem to be the obvious thing to do the opposite of that.
Right.
Wouldn't you want to hire like the peacenik hippies to be the police for your hometown? Why would you want the guy trained for a war zone?
Right. And, one of the things, excuse me, about that is the whole IQ issue. The reason that many departments employ those IQ tests and personality tests is because they want you smart enough to obey, but dumb enough not to disobey. They don't want you to question. They don't want you to question the orders you're given. And they want a certain personality type that kind of takes a little bit of pleasure in doing these kinds of things, is the authoritative, self-important, abusive type. So, I mean, they get exactly what they're looking for. Never let it be said that they don't know who these people are. This is exactly who they go for. So, and then you give these people, these types, power and authority to murder people, and guess what? Oh no, they murder people. They hurt people constantly.
So this paragraph is where the rubber starts to meet the road for this. So let me continue. I know it's scary for people to be stopped by cops. I also understand the anger and frustration if people believe they've been stopped unjustly or without a reason. I am aware that corrupt and bully cops exist. When it comes to police misconduct, I side with the ACLU. Having worked as an internal affairs investigator, I know that some officers engage in unprofessional and arrogant behavior. Notice he didn't say illegal or criminal.
Right. He's not been arrogant. This whole thing has been arrogant.
No, good point. No, he worked as an internal affairs investigator, but didn't point out that some cops are criminals. Interesting.
Right.
Interesting. Sometimes they behave like criminals themselves. Like criminals. They're never criminals. I also believe every cop should use a body camera to record interactions with the community at all times. Every police car should have a video recorder. And you don't have to submit to an illegal stop or search. Okay, I want to read that again. And you don't have to submit to an illegal stop or search. Right. Well, what does not submitting to an illegal stop or search mean?
Right.
Doesn't it mean challenging them?
Right. But we don't get to do that. We get our day in court, Patrick. Yeah. I think he is too just like most of the people that support this stuff. They're
And this is-
confused about,
Go ahead. Yeah.
you know, you can't yell freedom and then yell obedience as well. Like freedom comes with a healthy measure of disobedience, of questioning authority. But so many of the patriots out there, they really believe that part of being free and living in our society and being a good American is to obey the cops. Like it's so twisted.
You can refuse consent to search your car or home if there's no warrant. Well, what if they don't stop?
Challenge.
Always ask the officer whether you're under detention or are free to leave. Unless the officer has a legal basis to stop and search you, he has to let you go. Well, what if they don't? Because that happens all the time. Finally, cops are legally prohibited. They're legally prohibited from using excessive force.
Right. Just like the laws that
they do
stop other criminals. Laws don't stop cops from being bad cops either.
And the moment a suspect submits and stops resisting, the officers must cease use of force. Oh my God, this guy you can't call him ignorant because he's in internal affairs. He's just lying. This is horseshit. But if you believe or know that the cop stopping you is violating your rights or is acting like a bully, I guarantee that the situation will not become easier if you show your anger and resentment.
Right.
You're just supposed to take it like a slave. Take it like a slave.
Right.
Worse, initiating a physical confrontation is a sure recipe for getting hurt. Police are legally permitted to use deadly force when they assess a serious threat to their or someone else's life. Wait. So you just don't defend yourself? Is that what we're being told to do here? When a cop is violating your rights, don't defend yourself because even they're not legally. First of all, I'm arguing law now, and this is pointless magic spell bullshit. But they're not legally allowed to shoot you if they're violating your rights. You are legally allowed to defend yourself. At least in Texas, I can quote that law. Not that you won't get murdered when you do so.
Right. Right. You have the right to obey. I've heard people say that. You don't have the right to question them, but you do have the right to obey. Okay.
Do what the officer tells you, and it will end safely for both of you. Tell that to the Twister guy. What was his name? The hotel guy. Oh, man.
Something Smith, maybe?
We have a justice system in which you are presumed innocent. If a cop can do his or her job unmolested, that system can run its course. Later, you can ask for a supervisor, lodge a complaint, or contact civil rights organizations if you believe your rights were violated. Just let it happen, and we'll talk later, is what we're being told here.
That sounds pretty rapey. Just let it happen. Just let it happen. Like,
feel free to sue the police. That's easy, right? You just have to ask the cops to, investigate themselves. You have to ask the justice system to investigate its own enforcers. Not a big deal.
And then it means nothing to them because they don't pay for it anyways.
An average person cannot comprehend the risks and has no true understanding of a cop's job. Hollywood and television stereotypes of the police are cartoons in which fearless super cops single-handedly defeat dozens of thugs, shooting guns out of their hands. Real life is different. An average cop is always concerned with his or her safety and tries to control every encounter. That is how we are trained. They are trained to worry about their safety, not ours.
And control every aspect of every encounter. I mean, the arrogance of this guy is unreal. To say, what was the first sentence in that paragraph you just read?
You cannot comprehend the risks and have no understanding of a cop's job.
Right, yeah. Because they're so much better than us. They're special. They're superhuman people. They're special.
You don't know what is in my mind when I stop you. Did I just get a radio call of a shooting moments ago? Am I looking for a murderer or an armed fugitive? For you, this might be a simple traffic stop. For me, each traffic stop is a potentially dangerous encounter. Show some empathy for an officer's safety concerns. Don't make our job more difficult than it already is. while we harass you and rob you and take your money at the threat of violence. Don't make our job harder than it already is. Just let it happen.
They're the biggest bunch of snowflake bitches out there. Like, they really are. For them to say, like, you don't know what's in our mind. Well, fuck it. You don't know what's in my mind either. She didn't know it was in Mr. Jean's mind when he was sitting on his own damn couch eating ice cream. Fuck.
So good to have you on my show. It's so good.
I just can't stand these people. Like, where do they get off? They're supposed to, and they'll tell you that all the time, to protect and serve is what we're here to do. No, they're not. And he's telling you that right now. Every sentence he's telling you, we're not there to protect and serve you. We're there to protect and serve us and ourselves. And that's it. The thin blue line is us against you. And what are you going to do about it, pleb? You don't have any power.
Well, the thin blue line is what it stands for, something that reveals it very clearly. Thin blue line. The thin blue line is a symbol used by law enforcement. Let's see. Symbolizes the relationship of law enforcement and the community as the let's see. Thin blue line flag meaning. Where was it? It was perfect. Thin blue line. It's basically like, we are the thing, the strong line that defend against all this black on either side, the black evil. And notice that there's black on both sides. That was what was interesting.
Right.
It's like there isn't a white side of the flag and then a blue line and then the evil. It is the evil and the evil and then the holy blue line of godliness right down the middle. Go ahead.
My producer used to say, like he said, it used to be that the thin blue line, at least what it was used as, was that it was supposed to represent the cops standing between the bad guys and the good law-abiding citizens. And now it's just them standing for themselves, them protecting themselves from everyone else. And you're exactly right. It all goes down to mentality. They believe that everyone they encounter is a potential threat. No, regardless. So that's the kind of mentality that they walk around with all the time. I remember hearing this woman once defending her cop husband and saying how we have to go everywhere and he's always on the lookout and he can't ever rest because it might be someone who he's arrested who wants after him. And it's just like, he took the damn job. He could find another job. If this is so taxing on your family that your husband walks around with PTSD and terrifies your children all the time in the store because he sees somebody that might look like somebody he arrested, then maybe he shouldn't have that job. Maybe this shouldn't be something that we ask people to do because we don't need it. Your job is to protect yourself. It's not a cop's job. Believe me, they'll tell you that. There's no constitutional mandate for them to protect you. So they can't have it both ways. Either they are obligated to protect people or they are not obligated to protect people. There is no middle ground. And I guess what? It's going to fall on they don't have an obligation to protect you.
Warm up the Boombas. Todd Rankles in with the super chat for $24.99. Dude, Todd, thank you. That's huge. Hilarious, he says. Oil rig workers and people who are in the construction industry die every single day. Police have a lot of fear in them. Very sad.
EMTs. Look, EMTs go out. They see some of the worst stuff you can see. They don't get to walk around just murdering people or going, I didn't like the way that guy wasn't trying to let me put the IV in his arm. So therefore he gets what he deserves. He's just going to die. Like, they don't get to do that.
Yeah. And Don points out something that is always worth pointing out is that if the rules of engagement for the military were applied to the police, a lot of these problems would be solved pretty quickly because you're just not allowed to do half the insane stuff these cops do for their...
The rules of engagement are much stricter for the military, yes.
Yeah, so we have one paragraph left, and we'll end on this. Woo. Community members deserve courtesy, respect, and professionalism from their officers. Every person stopped by a cop should feel safe instead of feeling their well-being is in jeopardy. Well, why would we feel that? Why would we feel that? It's just our entire bank account. It's just it's just a threat of violence if we don't as you say in this article, defer to you at every possible step, no matter, even if you're violating our rights. To stay alive, we've got to defer to you. Why would we feel unsafe?
Everything they do teaches us that we should be afraid of them. Don't wake daddy. He might get angry.
If we could,
everything.
Yeah. If we could defend ourselves, maybe we'd feel safer, but we're not allowed to. You're telling us not to. And then ending it. You're right. This is abuse. This is how abusers talk. They talk out of both sides of their mouth. They're like, don't resist, but love me.
Right.
What?
Gaslighting.
What? He says, the article closes with, shouldn't the community members extend the same courtesy to their officers and project that the officer's safety is not threatened by their actions? Well, the only problem is the cops' actions are a threat to our safety.
And I didn't stop them. Problem. They stopped me from continuing throughout my day. And I love how he separates the community from its officers. Like there's the community and then the officers. They're not part of that community. They are separate from the community. I find that a little bit creepy too, because you know what? You should have to live in the community. If you're going to be a police, you should have to live amongst that community and be responsible for the actions that you take in that community. Unfortunately, that's not how it works right now. A lot of people the cops get away with a lot of stuff because people think it's okay for them because they have a little badge, and it's too late when it comes to your door. I have talked to so many people who used to be like, oh, the cops are great and this and that. I just recently had a family issue with the cops, and they're learning real quick that the cops will lie and they will abuse their power and authority. And it's too late when it comes to your door to complain about it then, because you have so little power. And even within the court system, you have so little power when it comes to holding cops accountable for their actions, that for a lot of people, it's just not worth it. And then it's too late. And it just keeps happening. So we got to get them before it's too late. We got to talk about it.
Well said, as always, Sherry. Thanks for joining me. Was there anything else you wanted to go over while we got you here?
No, that's it. I need to be done now.
You sound like you're a little sick, so hopefully you'll go get some rest. And hey, guys, thanks for watching today, and thanks for the super chat, Todd and Jim and EG earlier. It's been quite a day. We had 3 live streams today, and they were all, I think, pretty cool. So if you didn't get the notifications for the other ones, go check them out. We did some good stuff today. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one. Oh, and thanks again, Sherry. It's always awesome to have you.
Thank you. Oh, it's great to have you too. Thank you.
All right.